What a great audience. Hello, Grand Rapids. You know, I believe that business, really business, has this wonderful opportunity to change the world for the better. Not because we must, but simply because we can. But it's going to take a different mindset for the leaders than is mainstream today. Not because today's leaders are bad, but because the world's future needs are so much different from where we've been. And there's an accelerating urgency for this change to occur. Now, when I started my business 40 years ago, I had a daughter in diapers. I didn't realize that business was the most powerful force on earth. But over the decades, since the Second World War, business has increased in prominence and capability like no other time in the history of the world. And my business has done okay. We've expanded to about 1,200 employees in 6 locations, and we have about a national sales force, and we've been fortunate to ride the wave of business expansion in the U.S. Business as practiced in the United States since the Second World War has created more wealth for more people than any other economy in the world. And the question that hung over me as I was growing up in our generation was, which economy was greater? The Soviet-style centralized government control or the U.S.-style open market economy? And we all know how that ended. That battle's over. We won. And since the dismantling of the Berlin Wall, I've watched businesses be harmonized around the world. Businesses in Germany and Hungary and Japan and China even, and Brazil, even Russia, look a lot like the U.S. system. And market-based economies work well. Competition sharpens capabilities and drives innovation and value creation. But as practiced and ready as business is today, the models that got us here are not complete enough for us to get to where we need to go. The business model today is based on Milton Friedman's thesis of maximizing value for the shareholder. He said there's one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits. And he referred to corporate social responsibility as a fundamentally subversive doctrine. Now, he didn't get it wrong. He just got it too narrow. And as successful as this American style of business as practiced today is, it's not always connected to the needs of the world. Simply following markets doesn't always result in good. Left to their own devices, as writer-consultant Clay Shirky reminds us, institutions will try to preserve the problem to which they are the solution. Consider the healthcare business, and I do this with a little fear and trepidation, where millions of people are performing wonderful, valuable services. But at least as a small portion of that system is involved in inadvertently defining success as delivering more services rather than figuring out how to have people not need their services in the first place. As successful as this business model has been, it's based on a theory that if business is successful, everyone's successful, a kind of float all boats kind of theory. Yet business as practiced today has resulted in, unfortunately, great disparities. The top 2% have more wealth than the other 98% altogether. But new models are emerging for us to evaluate. We've learned that the opposite of the Milton Friedman theory, the Milton Friedman model, is the antithesis, if you will, is a form made popular by Muhammad Yunus called social business. In Nobel Prize winner Yunus's model, the way to solve the world's problems is to form a social business that provides near zero return to the shareholders. You get your investment back with no or little interest, and you start another business. And in this way, we can create maximum impact with the same dollars. And as we contrast these two models of maximizing shareholder value on the one hand, near zero shareholder on the other, there's a real sweet spot for business in this middle ground often referred to as sustainable business. The seminal concept is to be able to move from a system where the key thing is the advancement of self to a system where the key thing is the advancement of all, of the whole system. And fortunately, there is an emerging field of practice doing just that. These leading thinkers are demonstrating that succeeding in business and making a positive impact on the world is not only possible, it's a kind of reinforcing loop where doing more good leads to more business, which leads to more good. So for me, the why business is clear. Business is the most qualified, it's been the most successful, and it's developing the right tools and models. But why now? Because the world is changing at warp speed, and we need additional skill sets for the future. Leadership for the next wave of change will be building on the competencies that we have developed so far, but will be adding, importantly, a new sense of compassion. And they will need a real boost in the area of adaptability to navigate the change that is happening so fast. Since the time of my birth, the planet has nearly quadrupled in population. No other generation has experienced that kind of growth. It's unprecedented. And my particular slice of the boomer generation, the leading edge folks, became teenagers in the 50s. And while still in our most impressionable years, we saw the world go from Leave It to Beaver to peaceful protests of war and civil rights to the National Guard actually killing students at Kent State and the assassination of our leaders. Now that was rapid, brutal change, and it impacted our worldview considerably. You know, X Prize founder Peter Diamandis and his co-author Stephen Kotler point out in their book Abundance, we can understand the change in the past, but not so well in the future. They say we tend to imagine the slope of change being much less in the future than in the past, when in reality, the conditions are right now for the most rapid change in our history actually accelerating. An example of this is the impact of democratization of information. 6 billion of the world's 7 billion people now have access to a cell phone, a 6-fold increase in a decade. Now that's a breathtaking change for the world. Consider the dematerialization that's occurring. We don't need as many things as we used to thanks to our smartphone. Clocks, alarms, paper and pencil, camera, photographs, books, maps, GPS devices, the list goes on. Our world is changing at lightning speed, and yet our minds want to stay with what we grew up with. We need a frame of reference in order to understand this onslaught of change. We need our sense of community more than ever before. Not just our virtual community, but our physical community. We need to belong in community. And fortunately, change happens best in community. How do we improve, though, in our communities? Do we wait for the federal government or the state government or even local government to solve our problems? No. Change happens best when communities come together around their problems. They envision the future. They measure the facts and the trajectory of change, and they plan how to solve their problems, and they build trust together by working in teams as they solve their problems one by one. And guess what? Business knows these tools really well. It's like getting up in the morning for us. Business is organized and accustomed to change processes. It embraces problems as opportunities. And we have a vested interest in healthy communities. But only a small fraction of businesses are comfortable exercising this muscle of community change. It's common for us to think about do business, make some money, and give some of that to charity. And communities are not necessarily comfortable with some of the business leaders either. They often speak a different language. They're filled with financial jargon, and they work at a different pace, often skipping over some important niceties. And they have different objectives, keeping the lights on, making sure the business thrives, sometimes at all costs. And if you read some of the headlines, you'd think that maybe CEO is a four-letter word. So business has this opportunity, but using its old norms, it's not too well prepared. And sometimes it's not too welcome in the community. So my assumption is that business needs to learn to start with the heart. Start with something that is good to do, and then use all of our business skills to figure out how to make it good for business. We need to apply our business acumen to soft things like learning how to employ people that have been on welfare. This not only improves the condition of the former welfare recipient and saves the state all kinds of money, but it improves the local economy, and we improve our business culture and our results as well. And we need to integrate products into our portfolios that solve problems like the crisis of access to safe water for the 780 million people around the globe who need it so desperately. And as we do this, we build our businesses by improving the economy in those regions impacted and by providing a sense of accomplishment and having connected our employees to something good. When I started my company 40 years ago, I didn't realize that I would be teaching entrepreneurship in the emerging sustainable economy at my alma mater, Cornell University, for 12 years. I didn't realize that my business purpose would be to positively impact society and the environment and be financially successful. I didn't realize we could hire people on welfare and have it great for our culture. I didn't realize a biosand water filter could impact hundreds of thousands of lives. And I now realize the opportunity business has to bring about positive change. So as us folks from the 60s age, we need to find kindred souls who will carry on this transition to a better world. And the urgency couldn't be more clear. For example, we need leaders who embrace diversity, not because it's hard or mandated, but because it feels right for the heart. You know, as the 60s advocates embraced all colors and backgrounds, it has taken the broader culture too long to overcome its isms of race and gender and sexual orientation and social standing. 50 years after civil rights legislation, only recently has some small portion of the white male majority begun to realize that they've led a pretty privileged life. Only now is the majority population coming to grips with the fact that it too will be a minority in a couple of decades. Only recently have we begun to realize that some women actually have wonderful qualities that make them better leaders. And only recently have we a majority of people indicating that they favor gay marriage. We need leaders who are good at both building successful businesses and leading change in the community. We need leaders who are willing to leave their egos and think about the entire ecosystem of life and realize that is where they get their identity. Or as Otto Scharmer says it so well, it's a shift from an ecosystem awareness that cares about the well-being of me to an ecosystem awareness that cares about the well-being of all, including myself. We need leaders who believe their purpose is to positively impact the world. And the hopeful part for me is that there's an increasing number of people of all generations working to bring about this kind of positive change. And very exciting to me is a younger generation that actually thinks like we did back in the 60s. So many of this younger generation thinks the world can be vastly improved just like we did. So many of the millennials don't mind being real and don't mind rocking the boat a little, just like we did. And they just like people. They find differences interesting, not scary. They like travel. They think it's a week in Uganda. Or as one blogger put it so succinctly, they don't recycle because it's good for the local environment. They recycle because they think they can save the rainforest. Technology has impacted them profoundly. The suffering of people around the globe is no longer a tale buried in the National Geographic magazine, but is instantaneously contained in text messages and blogs from their friends who are there. Millennials believe that tolerance is not a compromise, but is a precondition for social dialogue. Turns out the leaders among the millennials align with many of us who grew up in the 60s, a time of chaos, a time in which we doubted the wisdom of our leaders, a time when we knew there must be a better way. I'm gratefully impacted by the values of these young folks. They don't have the baggage of the past. They have a whole new unknown world in front of them that we are all collectively test driving together. It takes a great mind. It also takes a great heart with a real sense of urgency to navigate this uncertain future. When I started my business 40 years ago, I didn't realize I'd have 3 daughters, all with wonderful husbands and sons, one setting the pace in evidence-based architecture for healing environments, another leading people to be more mindful and as a result more healthy, and one sharing leadership with me in the family business. But I do now. So to Susan, Larissa, Christina, and to your generation of leaders, it's up to you. Here you go. Tag, you're it.